welcome back to another episode of Redefine Parenting. I'm your host, Veenu Keller. I want to welcome you to Spanglish World Network and H.E.R Network on Zingo TV, channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download both the Zingo TV app on the respective app stores, iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. This app is free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire Sticks, Roku Sticks, and all smart TVs 2016 and forward. Today I have an amazing guest. I met this man, oh gosh, I feel like it's like 6, 7, maybe even 10 years ago. And we were both serving at a leadership camp in California. And there was something about this man when he spoke on stage. He was so dynamic. He really was able to pull the youth in to what he was saying, teaching them how to write their goals so that these are goals that they can accomplish. He had such an amazing way of communicating with these children in order to get them to communicate back and really share what they wanted to do and aspired to do. Harry Singha is my guest today, and he's an elite business owner. He helps leaders all over the world by he's created a world-class speaker academy, which provides individuals with the tools to dramatically improve their public speaking. He's also the founder of the Harry Singha Foundation. And in 2017, he won an award for the Global Humanitarian Award. If that doesn't say enough about this man, I don't know what does. But Harry, welcome to Redefine Parenting. I'm so happy to have you here.
It's an honor to be here and bringing my British accent to your show. So I promise to speak slower.
I love it. I love it. So, Harry and I went back and forth about like, what value could we bring? And one of the things that he said is, we could talk about communicating with kids and the rapport that we need. And immediately I was like, yes, because one of the things that I realized years ago when I was getting into the whole parent-child coaching realm was that when kids don't listen, we're out of rapport with them. If you want to have communication with someone on the street or a business association or your partner, whoever, you have to be in rapport. If anything is going to land with them, if anything's going to be a reciprocal conversation. And one of the, epiphanies I had is like, well, that's why my boys don't listen to me. It's because I'm not in rapport with them. I'm coming in with a superior posture. You do this, you do that. Don't talk back. And yet I'm wondering, why are we not communicating? So when I discovered that rapport was so important to have with your children, and there's a way that you could be a parent, still feel like you're in control and still be in rapport. So when I saw Harry say, yeah, we could talk about this, I was like, amazing. This is what we need. This is what we need today. So I'm going to throw it back to you, Harry. So if I asked you, what is communicating with kids? What does that mean to you?
I remember when you sent me, I said there was like 4 or 5 things we could speak, and you went, yeah, let's go with this. And I thought, yeah, that's where Veenu's heart is. But also when you sent it to me and said communicating kids, the first that pops in my head is, let's break those 2 major words down, kids. So for all the parents that are watching, when we say communicating kids, sometimes it's usually in a place of like, oh, right. And then you think of kids like there's some aliens, even though they seem like that at some point. So first of all, the pre-frame we want to take on board is that if they're kids, that they're still humans, and all the rules of rapport and communication and all the stuff that Veenu and I are going to share still apply to them, even though they feel like they're from a different planet. So that's the first thing, right? That even though they're kids, they're still human beings. And the second part on communication, Veenu, I remember when you said it, I was like, if a parent was to come to me and say, hey, Harry, look, I'm struggling with communicating my kids, my mind just automatically thinks, what does that mean to you? What does that actually mean? What are you actually saying to me? We're talking about communication, right? And usually it's one of 4 things. One is I want to communicate better with my kid because I'm not getting through to them. What I'm saying, they have no idea what I'm saying. It makes no sense, and they just don't get it, right? So it's usually about, how do I share what I want to share more effectively with my kids? That's the first one, and we can unpack as many as you want. But the second one is, you have no idea what they're saying, right? They're speaking a totally different language, and it's like they speak and you're like, what happened there, right? So the second one is about you understanding them. So it's still communication, and we've heard the whole thing, communication is a 2-way, but sometimes individuals just want the first one. Like, I want to be able to communicate to them better. Right? The second one is I want to understand them so I know what they're talking about. And then the third one is usually a case of, sometimes parents don't want to admit it. It's like, I want my kids to do what I want them to do, right? It's in this world, it's called influencing and persuasion. And for each of these areas, there's tools and strategies that you can use. And then the fourth one is exactly what Veenu had said. When a parent comes to me and say, hey, I want to communicate better with my kids, and I ask them, sometimes it always boils down to, I'm not connected with them. I just feel so
Mm,
disconnected. I don't know who they are. There's absolutely nothing there. There's no love. There's no this. And even if it is, it's like, you're not in control, right? So those four areas, Veenu, like how you communicate to them, how you understand them, how to actually influence them, and then the last one is how do you actually build rapport and connection. So those are the things that popped into my head. But there's so many more. But I think that's wherever you'd like to take it.
yeah.
You're all.
So it's interesting because, so for my listeners, you've heard me say before, one of the goals, at least in my house and in many other houses that I've, spoken to with my clients, is they want to have an open, safe, and trusting space to communicate with their kids. They want their kids to be able to talk to them about what's going on in their world. They want to be able to talk without judgment, because we too had to unpack, what does open mean? What does safe mean? What does trusting mean? When we say that, and it's being able to create that space where your kids feel comfortable enough that you're not going to judge them, you're going to hear them, and that even if they're making a choice, that's not the choice that you want for them. They still feel that they have an open space to come and talk to you. And, the way we do that is, kind of what you were saying, Harry, is like, how do we create that rapport, that nurturing? I have 10-year-old twins, and my daughter came to me the other day, and I think I showed this on the other another show too. But she's like, "Can you help me with something?" And I was like, "Sure." What? She goes, "Can you help me stop talking so much?" And I was like, okay, this is something I heard my entire life, right? Like, I always heard, you talk too much, you ask too many questions, this and that. And so I'm like, okay, but I also know that the behaviors that our children show us are their way of getting their needs met. It's an unmet need. It's what we punish them for so they don't feel they can have that need met. And so I was like, wow, I don't want that to be my daughter. So I said, honey, well, why do you think that you talk too much? Well, people tell me, you, dad, like my teachers, my friends. And I'm like, well, what does that mean to you? What does it mean to you to talk too much? And she's like, well, maybe I'm just not talking at the right time. Maybe I'm giving too many details. And okay, so I mean, Harry, you know me, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I get that. And how do we nurture that in a better way? And so immediately I felt, wow, I've done something right for my child to come and say, hey, look, this is something I get in trouble for. I've heard you say, I've heard dad say, I've heard so many people say it to me, and I want help. So she trusted me to not have any judgment, to have this real and raw conversation with her. And at that moment, I felt so grateful for being able to establish a relationship where my children can talk to me. And my husband does that too. Like, he will tell me, like, yeah, on the way to school, that's their time to talk. And like Samuel, our son, will talk to his dad about so many different things. And, my husband comes and talks to me about it. I was like, wow, like, that's so great that our kids feel that we have created this opportunity for them to come and talk to us. So, again, I think it goes down to rapport. I think all four things I think get affected. Like, are we talking to talk and tell them what to do? Do we want the communication because we're not understanding? And we're also in a different generation. Today's generation is not talking the way our generation was.
Yeah. You said a word. You said the word connection now to young people. The first thing pops in the head is Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
We was on a different generation when connection meant something deeper. But as you were speaking, Veenu, the other things popped into my head. I mean, we can get into the practicalities and the tools and things on. One of the things that popped in was when you start talking about your own kids, it reminded me, you know,
Oh, we're having a little bit of internet issues over there in the UK. So, When he comes back on, we will keep picking up the conversation with him. And to go on with this, it's how are you creating that space for your son or your daughter to come to you and feel that they can talk to you? What's going on in the house? What is keeping you from that lack of communication? And, as Harry was describing, what part of communication are you wanting in that time? Are you wanting them to hear you? Are you wanting to understand them? Do you have that rapport, that connection with them to say, hey, I hear you. I hear you and I appreciate you. One of the reasons why kids continue with the behaviors and they're loud and proud and we're just like, what is going on? It's they're not heard. Think about when you raise your voice. What happens when you raise your voice? It's because you're in a situation where you don't feel that you're being fully heard, that you need to raise your voice to have that impact or to be heard, or what you're saying, that important part isn't necessarily being heard. So when we're dealing with our kids in different situations, it's really asking ourselves, what do they need right now to feel heard? And what do you need to feel heard? And there's different parts of communication that we have with our children. And some of it is realizing the type of personalities that our kids have too. Like, are they that person that wants to connect and they want to really hear you and they're inspired by your words and it's a great conversation? Are your kids those ones that just want to, like, don't tell me the details, mom, just tell me what I need to do and so I can get it done? Are they the ones that have a creature to habit, like they really just communicate when things are going the way they need it to, it's routine, it's ritual? Or are they somebody that needs a lot of details? Like, what are the details that they're needing in order to understand what you say? And look, here's Harry back. We were just talking about like different styles of communication. Well, the different personalities, like where our children's are. Like, do they need the details? Do they just need to get it done? Are they really going to listen to you and connect with you? Or are they somebody that just needs, like, as long as it's a ritual? So I was just saving space while you were
Well,
reconnecting.
I said the word connection and we must have got disconnected.
I love it. I love it.
Where I was up to, but did I share the bit around what I learned as when I started helping young people at the age of 15, 16?
You left off by saying that my story about my children, my daughter talking to me, had sparked something in you.
Oh, that was it. That was the bit about with our own children. With our own children, we're mere mortals. And for the viewers that are watching, they might think, you know what? I can speak to my niece, my nephew. I can speak to someone else's kid, and it's like, it's all cool. The reason for that is the most important thing is for you to be present. You can't be thinking about yourself. And when we're with our own kids, it's like, with my own two children, like, if I'm not getting through to them and they're not getting through to me, it's like, there must be something wrong with me as well. It's like, if you're not this good, then it's a slight on me. And as parents, one of the most difficult things to do is to be able to take ourselves out of it. And so that's really key. And the other point I wanted to make was when I, at the age of 15, 16, was thrust into working with young people in children's homes, people are like, how is this guy getting these results? What is he doing? And I used to say to him, I'm not doing anything. They go, what are you saying? And I said to him, I'm listening. And I thought, that's all I'm doing. I remember there were two things, listening and I was believing in them. It wasn't just because I was another young person. I've used those two rules and strategies all the way through my life. And you know what? It gives you peace. Because if you go into an interaction or a conversation with someone knowing you don't have to have all the answers, you just know that you being present and listening to them takes so much weight off you. Like, you don't have to fix anything. So I want to make sure we get those pre-frames out. So that it triggered me when you said about your own kids, and I think about my own. I'm like, oh, it's like in relationships, I think, yeah, I know, but my wife will tell you something else. My kids will tell you something different, right? So my wife laughed whenever I say I'm a speaking coach. I talk communication. She always has a little giggle when I go. She's like, what do you mean? Right? But this is that thing about in our own families, with our own partners, with our own children, we are mere mortals because we have this added aspect of how does that impact me? And if you can move that aside, you can start using the tools that we're going to discuss today. So hopefully that added value for you.
Yeah, no, it does. So, I was also talking about, the challenges that I see, especially, I've lived through them, but also the work I do with my clients is that, some of these families are just like, we just don't know how to communicate in our house. Like there's just not, it's like one's talking, it's going like, oh yeah, 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 yeah. And then the other one's talking. It's like there's no communication. There's no connecting, not Wi-Fi, but connecting as a person. There's no understanding and appreciating. There's judgment, there's blame and shame. And it just kind of sends everything in disarray. So let's go into some of these strategies that we can help. Let's help these families. Let's help these families to learn how to communicate.
Sure, because all the strategies interconnected. I think what we'll do, we'll build into how to build rapport at the end, right? Because the rest will take care of it. So the first one, whenever it comes to you don't feel that you're getting across, your messages aren't getting across, I always say from that one, the strategies that you need to think about is this. Number one, I need to be able to speak their language. And I'm going to go into what that means, right? Because you have to understand everybody has different languages, right? So if you're smart, everything I'm going to say is speak their language. So your question should be, well, how do I find out their language? That's the key, right? So we're going to make sure we show you how to learn your child's language, right? If you're making notes, write that one down. If you learn nothing from this show other than I'm going to learn my child's language, and I'm going to speak to them in that language authentically. I added that word. Right? So if your kid speaks a certain way, you just try and mimic it, which most people will teach you, you're in trouble, right? So it's speak to them in their language, but authentically what resonates with you. So that's the first part. The second part about you understanding what they say, it still comes about learning their language, but what it is all the usual stuff about, asking questions, seeking clarification. However, what you really got to be doing here is this. When they speak to you, you just asking questions. You can get to like what Veenu said. You're always talking, you're always asking questions. Asking questions can sometimes be like an interview. It can be a lecture. And I always pre-frame it with, I'm not sure I understood this, so let me check.
Right.
Because then they're like, oh, okay. Rather than I'm just asking questions because I'm digging. Your goal should be, I want to understand what they just said. But here's where the golden nugget is, because that's the next part, part 3. When we talked about how do you influence your kids? That's like usually the $1 billion question. How do you influence them? And as a speaker coach and communication, one of the biggest things that I get called in for is, Harry, can you come and talk about influence, persuasion, how to get people to comply? So let's talk about that, how to get your kids to comply. Here's the trick. And it's like, I'm not here to hide anything from you. In sales, in persuasion, in influencing, this is the trick of not you understanding your child, because you need to understand it. Because the third part is this. You have to make them feel that you've understood them.
Correct.
Whether it's in, you'll know that, Veenu, it's like when we want to get young people to put down their guns and their knives and pick up pens and microphones. We can do whatever we want, but at the end of the day, they're going to really pay attention. And Veenu talked about, when we're speaking to young people or anybody, it's like, how do you get them to stay engaged? How do you get them to pay attention? How do you do all of these things that the world's best speakers do? And you got all the influence strategies, but I always say to people, if you can make the goal as a speaker, as a communicator, is not always about you being understood. The primary goal is, it's not even the audience being understood. It's you making the audience feel you understand them. So I'm giving you like the surface level, because now we've built onto rapport. You can bring me back anytime you want, Veenu. Because now, if we answer the question as, how do you get to know your children? is actually the key tool and strategy in rapport and connection. If you want to be connected with your children, the model that I sort of created was, I called it KYC. KYC. And you know what KYC stands for? Veenu, it stands for Know Your Child. Right?
I love it.
In business, it's called Know Your Customer. Right? In leadership, it's called Know Your Community. So if you want to connect with your community, you want to connect with your customers, you want to connect with your child, right? The same model exists. So KYC says know your child. Your next question should be, Harry, how do I get to know my child, right?
So how am I going to know my child?
And I've already told them the answer. What I said right at the off. You've got to learn their language.
Learn their language.
You've got to learn their language, and you've got to speak to them in that language. And here's the beautiful thing. Us Brits, when we go on holiday, we are the most arrogant language on the planet. Because if we go to Spain and we can't speak Spanish, I imagine we want to order something like a cheese sandwich, and we say cheese, and they go, huh? Cheese, cheese, and we say cheese louder, like as if they're going to understand it, right? So it's disrespectful. But check this: if we go to another country, and imagine, I think I know what the word cheese is, but imagine I didn't say it perfected. If I didn't say it perfect, and I think it's queso. I don't know. Am I right, Veenu? Is that
queso in Spanish? Yes.
How would you say it, Veenu?
Queso.
Queso. I would say queso, because they go cheese sandwich. Queso. Because guess what? My imperfection shows I'm trying. My imperfection shows this guy is respecting my language, that he's trying to work it out. And guess what? They're going to turn around and go, queso, oh yeah, cheese. They're going to try and say what I said. And we got all connection. And I'm probably going to get a discount on my cheese sandwich, right? But I just want you to understand, when you're trying, attempting to learn someone's language, subliminally, you've got their respect because you're showing respect. So how does this now work when I say know their language? First of all, you have to be humble enough and go, this is my kid. I don't know what their language is, right? And what does it mean to learn their language? It's stuff that Veenu teaches, everybody teaches. I put it under that model of BVW. Because when we think language, we think words, right? Which is the W. You're like, they're saying words. And even that throws people. The jargon that sometimes the kids are using. You're like, I have no idea what they're saying. They're speaking like as if they're texting me. But I just want you to understand. Let that go. Because it's only a tiny part of their communication. It's tiny. That's why young people... Sorry, Veenu, go for it.
I just wanted to add to that is that it's taking the judgment off of it. It's taking the judgment, like, well, they talk to me like they text, because that's one of the things when you say know their language, all I think I'm like, okay, BRB, be right back, and trying to translate that. And the other thing that I want to touch upon is that when you say like raise your voice, and that's one of the things I was saying when you had gotten disconnected from us, was that, if we're not being heard, we raise our voice. That is a cue when your child is raising their voice, they do not feel you're hearing them.
100%. You know what? That gives us another gift, because it's like, that's what I like. If you keep speaking and I'll keep throwing things in with pitch and cat, because I usually say to people when I'm teaching, especially parents, right? Especially parents, when we're teaching communication skills, and we break down what I've just been sharing with you about, learn their language and then utilize it and speak to them. And I'll break down what BVW is in a second, right? I always then hit a pre-frame and I say, hey, for parents, when you want to practice your rapport building skills, doing it at 1 a.m. when your child's just come home and they said they'll come home at 9 p.m., that's not the time to be practicing your rapport skills. That's the time to be practicing your state management skills, right? So it goes hand in hand, right? So if we're raising our voice, and believe it or not, it's something that I always put at the end when I talk about it. It's, when it comes to communication, communication is energy. If you want one word for it, it's energy, right? So you'll communicate energy. Back in the day before there were languages, it was all vibration, right? Think about that. So language, when we talk about the words, The reason why kids don't use words because they're very intuitive and they realize the B and the V carry so much, even though they're not aware of it, right? So let's make sure we get all of that out. I have no idea how long we've got, but let's
still have some time. So let's talk about the BVW so we can understand that.
BVW, and then you'll add your wisdom to it. So when I say let's keep this really practical, right? So what I want you to do is, I don't want you to go, right, I'm going to go test this stuff on my child right now, right? Even though you can, here's what I would prescribe you, right? Is this. What if you took a week to learn your child's language? Would that be a wise investment? It would be. What if you just took an hour? Would that be a wise investment? But guess what? You only need 5 minutes, 10 minutes. But if you did it consistently, here's why. When we think BVW are the 3 types of language. W is words, the actual words we speak. The V is, how does your child use their voice? Do they always speak fast? Do they speak loud? What is the patterns? That's all I want you to do. And you don't need to be a brain scientist, but it is about brain science. But all you have to do is watch and listen. Guess what? You don't even have to have a conversation. Observe them having a conversation with someone else. Someone that they're having a vibe with, they're in tune with, right? And listen to how, not the words they're saying, let that one go for a second. And you're just like, are they speaking really fast? Are they speaking loud? Are they speaking loud? Or is it, whatever it is, just look for the pattern. Within 5 minutes, you will see and hear everything you need to know. Then B is body. How we communicate with our body is 55%. You just need to know that's a lot. That's more than half. The body and the voice, those 2 things, how they use their voice, your baby, your child, your kid, I don't care if they're 30 years old, right? But this is your kid. And trust me, like I said right from the beginning, kids are human. So this works with your partners as well. I know some of you think you're like, hey, I could learn my partner. But here's the cool thing. You're just observing. You're just observing. And you're going to come back and tell Veenu Keller what you learned, right? So you're like, hey, my child, when they speak, they use their voice and these are the patterns that they got. When they're talking to people, they have certain gestures. You notice I've done this for a while, right? So you pretty much know this is one of Harry's patterns, right? And sometimes I'll do this, sometimes I fold my arms, sometimes I'm doing this. But all you got to do, forget everybody else, just your child. If you've got 2 children, fine, then observe them separately, right? But how simple would it be? And I tell you, it's really easy. And you have no goal. Do not think I'm going to wave a magic wand. I just want you to learn their language. So you will come back and go, when child A speaks to most people, they pretty much are like, sometimes they put their head here, sometimes they're swaying, sometimes they're doing something with their body, or they're they're gesticulating, they've got gestures, or whatever. What do they do with their face? Just look for the patterns, right? 3 or 4 patterns. And remember, this is the key bit. If they do this and you're someone that doesn't do that, that's not what I want you to do. Remember I said keep it authentic, right? So if they turn their head or they're moving a little bit and you think I could do that and that's naturally me, then that's the one that you go, when I speak to them, I'm going to do that. So how does it all work? You found out how your child speaks through their body. So imagine when they speak, they do this. And you're comfortable with doing that. You don't have to have a full-on, let's sit down and talk about the issue that we've got going on at life. You could just be saying to them, look, what time are you going to come home tonight? What time are you going to school? Is there anything you need me to get you? Right? What do you want from shopping? Is there anything you want to get from the groceries? And you're just doing this. They don't know you are doing it. I promise you. You're just using their language. But if you could incorporate your voice at the same time, those 2 are better than you starting to say, you know, whatever like they use on TikTok or go wagwan or whatever they say. No, don't do that. Don't do that. You're doing stuff without them knowing. So I'm going to repeat this again. Learn their language and then speak to them in that body language, that voice language that resonates best with you. And have no expectation other than, this is how you make it playful. You want to do it without them knowing. You don't want to do this and they go, Mom, Dad, what are you doing? What are you doing this for? Right? You don't Don't do this. But here's where the science is so beautiful. Are you ready for this? You could be having a conversation with someone else while your child is present, and you could be talking to that person doing this, using the same voice, volume, and tone that they use. And guess what? It's the science of resonance. You're going to
Mm.
be moving and vibrating the same as they do when they're in their flow. And there's something about them that they'll go, and they don't even have to see you, to be honest, because vibration happens without us seeing. So I don't know how deep I went there, Veenu, but
No,
you got
that's
the.
good. That's good. And I think there's so much to unpack with that too, because when you recognize the patterns that your kids are going through, you also can, if a child is speaking very loudly, and very fast, there's two things that come to mind: that they don't feel like they've been heard, because number one, they have to speak so fast to get everything out because they feel like you're going to cut them off. And two, they have to speak louder because they feel like they're never heard. So these are patterns that run. And I know that one so well because that was me. I would speak so fast, I'd speak so loud, and people are like, whoa, slow it down. We can't understand you. And I heard that most of my life. And in my home, it was like, okay, 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 we heard you. Okay, okay, okay. Like I'm in an Indian home, and okay, okay, okay. And they just like cut me off.
Yeah,
Like, okay, we've heard enough from you. And
yeah,
so I created a pattern, and I would talk very fast. I talk with my hands, that's my body language. And I talk very loudly. And so it's pattern recognition is so important, especially in communication. And like you
that's,
pointed out, it's like our body language. There's things that I teach my families as well, as like that whole match and mirroring, like, and that's kind of what you're describing, is that, and make it authentic, because if you don't, your kids will look at you like, what are you doing?
yeah.
The
And this,
other thing that I get from that also, though, is when you do start to, recognize their body patterns and their words and their tonality and their voice, when you start to change, sometimes it will like be a pattern interrupt for them, because they don't even realize that they're talking in a disrespectful tone, or, talking too fast or whatever. And they're like, and it sets them back.
yeah,
So it's really great to be able, and it sometimes it ends up in a laughing, like, I don't sound like that. Well, yeah, you do. Should I record you? And then, it kind of breaks that whole tension, so you can get back in there and really talk about what's going on. So I really like that BBW. That's really, really easy.
we can go a little deeper if your audience want it, because it's what you just said there, Veenu. It's, if we remember energy, and I'm going to take on from what Veenu said, it's about how we respond. Do we raise voices and so on? It's when we can remove judgments. I want to take you deep, woohoo, and that is this: if you think of energy, and your child is coming at you with like a crazy energy, and let's just call that a lower energy. Who are you at your core?
Mm.
And if at your core you say, I'm a kind, compassionate person, but this person was talking to me like that, so I'm going to shout back. Well, hang on. If you really, really want to get that, whether it's kids, whether it's anybody else, it's, what is your energy that when you get squeezed, what are you going to do? We'll see the real you. Is that your default? And I know it's a tough thing to do, especially with our children, because we're like, when we feel like we're not in control, we're not helping them, we start feeling helpless. We're like, we go to like whatever we think, and we're in a very low energy. If you can, because to complete this whole model, I said what KYC stands for was know your child. KYC also stands for let them know you care.
Mm.
And
We just
can
got to
you love your child?
take that in for a minute. We just got to take that in for a minute. Let them know you care.
That's it. Exactly. Because that model, if you remember when you talk about mirroring, like me, I'm that's my life is about taking concepts and finding ways to communicate them to 10-year-olds and give it to the 50-year-olds, right? Is if you think this line is a mirror, right? And I put KYC on this side, what's on this side? It's KYC. It's mirrored. So when Veenu was talking about mirroring, I want to realize what actual mirroring means to me. It's when you stand side by side with someone and because remember that old adage, they don't care what you know until they know you care.
Mm-hmm.
If you're communicating like that KYC, know your child, learn their language. If you've learnt their language, this is part of that thing I talked about, that if Brits go to another country, if we're speaking someone else's language, and we've got the English to Spanish dictionary and so on, what we're actually communicating is that we care. So my biggest challenge for you is this: do you love your child? You're like, yeah, that's why I freaked out about it, right? But if you love your child, can you love your child in those moments where there's so much low energy? In those heated moments, are you still able to communicate, just like Veenu said, with compassion, with kindness? Even if it's not your child, these are virtues. These are not values. These are virtues. Virtues means behaviors that demonstrate high moral standards. How
Right.
are your morals, yeah, how are your moral standards when your child and you are not communicating? Is it like, is this the time to raise your voice? It's your
Well,
choice.
you touched on something too, I think is important, is that, for those that are listening, think about a time where you knew you screwed up. You knew that what you did was wrong. How much do you love yourself in that moment? Probably not a lot, like, because you're so busy beating yourself up for what you did. So when your child is in front of you and you are calling them out on something that they did, they already knew that they screwed up, they feel bad. Do you love them enough to love them when they can't love themselves? Do you love them enough when they don't know how to love themselves? Because this is what our kids need. When you talk about communication, it's not coming at your child, it's coming with your child.
Mm.
It's being able to absorb in that moment. They know what they've done wrong. What do we want instead? Like, I always tell parents, like, when they're upset that their kid spilt the milk, like, why did you do it? They will say, why did you? Who cares why? The fact is the milk is spilt. Let's talk about, what are they going to do from this point on? What do you want them to do from this point on? I mean, fine, clean it up. And what lesson, what gift can they get from that moment versus hounding into them? Why did you? Why did you? Like, we know why. When my twins are at each other, it's like, why do they keep doing it? They're doing it because, number one, they both want to be in control. Number two, they want to be loud enough so one of us intervenes. I mean, that's the why. We know the why. What do we want instead? And it's really important that we're going in and we're communicating in a way, once again, take out the judgment. Love them. Love them the way that they don't know how to love themselves in that moment, because they know they're hurting, and hurt people hurt people. And that's one of the things that we've been discussing with the twins, because there's a lot of sibling rivalry going on right now. There's a lot of, back and forth with them. And it's like, hurt people hurt people. And I keep saying this, I said this on another show. When you are upset with somebody, you're drinking the poison and expecting them to die. And if that's the case, they're not dying, you are. Because what you're doing, just going off of what Harry's saying, is that you're bringing your energy low. You're bringing your energy low. So when you're upset with your kid because they're upset, you're matching their low energy. And if both of you are at low, how are you guys ever going to come out of it? Someone needs to have the higher energy to bring the low back into the high.
Spot on, because that's exactly, in the world of sales, when we're training people's sales and we get back to influencing so on, they always say the highest energy wins. And the highest energy doesn't mean the loudest. Right? Highest energy simply means this, that when you have that interaction with your child where it's gone so bad, they shouted, screamed, you shouted, screamed, how do you feel and how do they feel? Here's the beautiful thing. Do you know who are the greatest salespeople on the planet? Those tiny kids, those little kids, right? Why? And you have to understand, this isn't just something that just happened. As your child, as they go through like toddlers and then these young kids and then they become teenagers and whatever, right? They've played what I call the jukebox game. Not a jukebox, what is it? Like, you have a fruit
That's not
machine.
true. The slot
Like,
machines.
a slot machine, right? You have a slot machine. Because I've always, when I teach people sales, I always say to my kids, are great salespeople. Here's why. They had more reasons why I should buy them what they wanted than I had reasons not to. And after a while, you just give up. You know what I mean by that? You know?
I
Like, come here.
do.
No, you can't have it. Why? Oh, because we're busy. Yeah, but I need it for school. Yeah, yeah, but mum said if after a while, you're like, okay, because here's what it is. Every time they give you a reason why, it's a coin in the slot machine, and they
Oh, I
keep
love
pointing,
that.
and they keep pointing in, and they keep pointing in, and guess what? The moment you give in, ka-ching,
Hit the
jackpot.
jackpot.
And here's what they've been taught. I will just keep going because I know. And guess what happens? You imagine yourself sitting in Vegas and you sat on a machine and you put all those coins in and people are waiting to come up. You ain't going to get off now because you know the moment you get off, someone's going to come in and put one coin. So now they're highly motivated to keep doing what they're doing. And you're like, what is it with this human being that I created, right? And it's like, they're just like, hey, I'm going to get what I want. But here's the thing, and it's beautiful because it links to what Veenu was saying. In life, in communication, whether it's your kids, is it about who's right in your core energy? Is it about you being right or is it about you being kind? In those heated moments, you have the humility to go, okay, look, I think I made a mistake here, right? Let's come back to this, let's check it. Because the person that can then sit there and go, okay, you know what? I could be wrong here, you know, and so on. That's when just giving someone power is real power when you give it away.
Mm.
You could just take that. Your kids are screaming because they're kids. There's so many rights they don't have. There's so much power they don't have. You control, especially if they live in your house. They're just flexing their muscles. They may not have power in their own peer group. But with great power comes great responsibility. So can you communicate to your kids with boundaries? That mean don't be that slot machine, right? But can you, like, if you wanna, you know, reprimand your children, do you need to shout? Not necessarily. Some of the most powerful things I've heard is when someone whispers in my ear, right? That's more powerful than shouting. But it's what energy do you want to come from in the most heated moments? And I'll say it again. When it's a heated moment, we'll translate that as a low energy moment. That's the time you want to work on your energy. That's the time you want to work on your state management. But I believe energy is even deeper than state management. And that's really your test, right?
Right.
And this is that thing. It's is your child and your relationship with them worth investing and upskilling for? Yeah, the answer should be yes. If it's not, then what you worry about, right?
Right. Don't worry
That's it.
about it then.
There
So
you go. Stress
I'm,
yourself out.
I'm going to put a great example to this so parents can just have clarity. So when my son he's very emotional. So when he has felt like not heard or he's been heard, but it wasn't a yes. So in his eyes, it wasn't being heard because he didn't get a yes.
Yeah.
Follow through and consistency is huge for me. Like if it's no, it's no. Like you're not going to put more quarters in me. I love that analogy because you're never going to hit the jackpot with me. As a matter of fact, I'm going to take all your money and then you're going to be even more sad. Right.
Yes.
So what I've learned over the years is that when he starts stomping up those stairs, I don't get mad at him stomping up the stairs. He's going in his room, the door shuts, and I hear him and I say, you know what? I hear you. I can appreciate you're upset right now. And when you're done having all this energy outburst, I would love to talk to you to see how I could support you. Immediately, he just calms down. Immediately. Where before, where it's like, calm down. Why are you doing this? You can't just, and it's going back and forth. So it's matching that energy. But now I'm coming in with the higher energy saying, okay, how can I love and support him right now? Because coming after him is just going to escalate it more. Ignoring it is going to escalate it more because he's crying for someone to hear him that he is unhappy, he's hurting, he's, whatever. And so when I come in there now, and I'm not rescuing him, I just want him to change his energy so we can talk, so we can resolve. And resolving doesn't mean he's going to get what he wants. Resolving is going to give him the gift of understanding so he doesn't have to exert so much energy in trying to understand what the no is about.
And also, it isn't about you getting what you want.
Correct. And you
So
said that in the beginning. You said that in the beginning. Take you out of it. Take you out of it. This has nothing to do with you. Your teenager comes in at 1 instead of 9. This is not about you.
yeah, and I think there was one part I left out because as a speaker coach, people are constantly like, I've got this thing that I want to get across, right? And we always say, okay, first of all, you got to know your audience. Right? Everything you say has to make them feel you've understood them. So you got to do the work. And then when we get on to the bit about the bit where you want them to understand you, you probably like Veenu said, like you calm down and say, then we can have this time to have the chat. And you're like, now I've got to get across my point because there's something really important I've got to get across. So there's one little magic I'll give you is the word called leverage. That means before you communicate, if you're speaking at an event, if you're a business owner, you're doing a business presentation, I always say, in those moments where you've got to share some key points, before you share them, communicate why what you're about to share is really important to them. It's got to be relevant, not important to you. So, for example, Veenu would say, right, what I'm going to share with you right now is really important because your buddy John is going to come around and John wants to know this and your teacher needs this and this is also going to help you because this and everything is about your child, why it's important to them. That's why you got to know them. So imagine if I say to you, Veenu, I have 2 more things to share with your parents. These things will make sure that they instantaneously build rapport and their children will thank them and say, wow, Mom, Dad, you've changed. And guess what? I'm not going to tell you what that is until tomorrow. All I did was leverage it. I don't have any more, by the way, right? I'm sure there's more I could share. But all I did was leverage it. And you're probably like, Terry, tell us now, right? I want you to create that same thing when you want to communicate to your kids the thing that is so important. Because once you tell them, you've got to leverage it.
And we call that the curiosity, right? Create the curiosity in them. And again, my listeners know it's my favorite thing. Be curious, not critical. We're almost out of time. We have a couple more minutes. And I just wanted to touch one more point, and we probably can do a whole nother show on this, Harry, but it's about that expectation. You know, when you have an expectation for your child and they have an expectation for themselves and it does not match, you will always find conflict. You're always going to find conflict. So like I have several clients where the parents just want their kid to be safe. The kid just thinks it's about trust. Two different expectations here. And so when I start to talk to, like I have 3 clients right now that I'm actually come to mind, when I'm teaching them about what do you think, like I unpack it. What do you think this is? Oh, it's about trust. Is it about trust or could it be about safety? And they're like, oh. And then all of a sudden their energy, you could see their energy totally shifts because now they have compassion for what their parents were saying. And then I do the same thing with the parents. I have to unpack it. Well, they should know it's about safety. I said, but they feel like you don't trust them. They're like, oh. So again, it's speaking their language. Part of the language is understanding expectations of what each other's looking for and wanting. So we have about 2 more minutes. I would love for you just to kind of wrap this up. Like, what are a couple, 1, 2, 3 nuggets that you really feel, would we can leave our listeners with?
I think it's best just to try and summarize what we've already said. First, I would say, watch this episode again. Second thing is, like I said, I'll summarize the key points. One is learn your child language. If you do nothing else, you will get that. Watch them without them knowing you're watching. Learn their language. Speak to them in their language for a way that's authentic to you. And then when I say KYC, know your child, it says know you care. Do you know the best way to let someone know you care? Actually love them. And love them in those times when they're at their lowest. And because then you let go of the outcome, what Veenu said about expectations. The outcome is to just let them know they're loved in that moment. You may not get your result, but if your highest outcome was this is another beautiful soul, a beautiful being that is just finding their way, and it's okay. They're going to mess up. They're going to mess up. But hey, just because they're not doing what you do doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way.
Yeah.
So yeah, just from me, thank you for allowing me to share. And yeah, Veenu, it's been fun. Right? You and I talking about, I know there's people listening and watching. So yeah, give yourself that gift. Give yourself that gift. Parenting is one of the most challenging things, but it's one of the most rewarding things you could ever have. Ever.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Harry, for being with us. This show can also be heard on Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out www.spanglishworld.ca for all your news programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it.